Right. So today I'm going over one of the issues that I'm very passionate about, and that is the separation of church and state. As viewers of my channel will know, you want to be religious, fine. I do not care. You shove it down my throat that I have to believe as you, we're gonna have a problem. But anyway, this article comes from ProPublica. So, no separation between church and state. Inside a Texas church's training academy for Christians running for office. Now, the First Amendment still exists. I do not care if you are a Christian. I do not care if you're a part of this church. You want to use your faith to inform your decision making? Well, that's called morals, so okay, fine. However, you also have to understand that not everybody believes like you. So just because you may believe X is wrong, that doesn't mean it's wrong for everybody. Now, I'm not talking about things that affect other people, obviously. I'm talking about the morality issues, or what's now known as culture war issues. Because, okay, you don't like the fact that the LGBT plus community exists, or that women actually are allowed to do stuff. That's fine if you don't like it. You don't get to dictate to other people that they shouldn't either. Anyway, let's get to the article. Before I do that, just a disclaimer, I guess you could call it that. This article is co-published with Fort Worth Report and the Texas Tribune as part of an initiative to report on how power is wielded in Texas. Okay, let's get to the article, and it looks like it's going to be a long one. So let's see how long this video is going to be. Texas Representative Nat Shatline's energy was palpable as he gazed out from the video on the computer screen, grinning ear to ear, the sleeves of his white dress shirt rolled up. The Republican legislator from Fort Worth had a message to share with people watching the pre-recorded video. As a Christian, you have an essential role in politics and local government. Essential, huh? Not that because you are an American, you have a role to play in politics and government, local government. It's that because you're a Christian. So, right then and there, he's basically saying non-Christians do not belong in government. Awesome. Love him already. There is no greater calling than being civically engaged and bringing the values that Scripture teaches us into every realm of the earth, Shatline said. Okay. It is not the government's job to spread the gospel. If you want to do that and you find someone who's willing to listen, great. Otherwise, no. The legislator was teaching a section of Campaign University, a series of online lessons he and others associated with Fort Worth-based megachurch Mercy Culture created to raise up so-called spirit-led candidates. The course, created in 2021, is an extension of Mercy Culture's increasingly overt political activities that have included candidate endorsements, The church's political nonprofit for liberty and justice houses Campaign University. Okay. Now, if we were actually enforcing the separation of church and state, churches are not taxed simply because, I shouldn't say they aren't taxed because, but if you want to keep your tax-exempt status, and this is true for all nonprofits, not just churches, you want to keep your tax-exempt status, you are not allowed to be politically active. Like, I've worked in nonprofits before, and say a candidate X wants to hold an event or distribute literature at the library. We can do that. But we have to allow for other candidates from other parties that same privilege to be able to hand out literature or to hold a campaign event. As long as we keep that open for all candidates, it's fine. But once we start endorsing, and actually I had at the Historical Society, there was this one board president who seemed to think that because he was hosting his preferred candidate at the Historical Society, that he was going to put out campaign signs. It looked like it was the Republican headquarters. Now, we are a nonprofit. We are not allowed to endorse people. So it's one thing to hold an event for a Republican. We have to allow the same thing to happen for Democrats. So we cannot be seen as endorsing. So having it look like the Republican National Committee's offices or state committee's offices vomited on the lawn of the Historical Society looks like an endorsement. So one of the other members plus one of the staff plus myself helped remove these signs simply because it's literally illegal. So that's what I'm talking about. Nonprofits, including churches, are not allowed to do that. They cannot be seen as endorsing a candidate. Actually, my understanding is that, like, say, Raphael Warnock, he occasionally I've seen him give political speeches from the pulpit because, well, he's the pastor, so all right. However, my understanding of the First Amendment is that's freaking illegal. You can do sermons about certain morality issues because that's what religion's supposed to be about. But you cannot turn it into a political rally. And in the case of, now it's pretty sticky with Raphael Warnock because he's both a pastor and a congressman. So, well, senator. So, yeah. Anyway. So, yes, someone's tax-exempt status should probably be removed. Anyway, Campaign University builds on Mercy Culture's growing political reach as Shatline, a pastor at the church, joins President Donald Trump's National Faith Advisory Board, and as the course now is offered at other congregations across the country. The lessons emphasize that would-be candidates don't need to be experts in government or the Constitution to seek public office or a place in local government. Okay. Granted, you do not need to be an expert. You don't need to be a constitutional scholar. Okay. But basically saying that you do not need to know basic civics. Okay, maybe not be an expert. Because, we have checks and balances for a reason. The courts are supposed to say, hey, don't do that. But, okay, fine. You don't need to be an expert. But it sounds like, like Trump, you don't need to have any civics education whatsoever. Which, no, you probably should have some nominal understanding of how government works. So, yeah. They also train potential candidates to stand for spiritual righteousness and teach them how to build a platform and navigate the campaign trail while maintaining a strong family and church life. Okay, now the second part about maintaining a strong family and church life, that's fine, because that's personal. And if that's what a candidate needs to survive the campaign, fine. Everybody has to decompress somehow. So that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But stand for spiritual righteousness? Okay, now, it's one thing to, like I said, it's one thing to do that personally, but there are certain issues that you might think is righteous, but tramples, spiritually righteous to you, but that tramples on other people's ability to exist. Like, say, the LGBT plus community. You might think that they're evil for whatever reason because, there's basically, it's now turned into GSM, which is gender and sexual minorities. Because otherwise, the alphabet would be yay long. So, you might think you're being spiritually righteous. And as I pointed out in the Bible, first off, no mention of being anti-LGBT plus anywhere in the New Testament. And in the Old Testament, it's a mistranslation. So this idea that, if you find something icky, some culture war issue that you find icky, fine. You do not get to legislate that simply because you start legislating morality and it's going to bite you in the butt. This is why the people outside of New York, why the conservative movement is having an absolute flippin' meltdown over Zoran Mamdani becoming the mayor of New York. Outside of the screams of he's a communist, because God forbid people would know what words freaking mean and know what the difference between, in this country they call democratic socialists, but they're social democrats. They're not even socialists. But those people who are freaking out probably could not tell you the difference between socialism and communism. So, yeah. But also, the meltdown is because Mamdani is a Muslim. And people have this idea in their minds, well, the bigots do, of what a Muslim is. And it's a terrorist. They do Sharia law, which is so funny and ironic, considering that Christian nationalism is basically wanting the same thing. They want their own version. It's just a Christian version as opposed to a Muslim version, which might have a lot of overlap, but still. Anyway, at the core of Campaign University is the idea that there's no separation between what happens within the church and what happens in the government. Okay, what about other religions? Not everybody is Christian. And that's what Christian nationalists, I shouldn't say they don't understand it. They just don't want other religions to exist. But, that's the pesky thing about reality. It doesn't conform to what you want. Other religions exist. There are people who are not religious. That is a thing. You are basically saying that, and not only are you basically saying that none of you should have a say, that everything should be dictated by the church, then you have to ask which church. Because there are Christians who are pro-LGBT rights, there are people who are pro-choice, there are people who are feminist. I mean, seriously, it's not like Christian is this monolith that everybody thinks the same way. And somehow, every time I point this out, there is bound to be someone in my comments who prove what I'm saying correct by trying to convince me that I'm wrong about, say, my interpretation of Christianity, or, the fact that I actually follow biblical scholarship and I'm aware that mistranslations in the Bible are a thing. The fact that your little brain cannot cope with the fact that that's a thing. Too bad. Reality. Actually, aren't you guys the party that says facts don't care about your feelings? And yet they're the first ones who will lose their absolute minds and have a meltdown when you throw that back in their face. Makes sense. Anyway, students are taught to interpret the First Amendment's Establishment Clause on the separation of church and state as a protection against government involvement in religion rather than vice versa. Okay, I've heard that argument before, and it's another super annoying one. Because if you're saying that the government can't interfere with the church, which it shouldn't, that's true, but that the church can interfere with government, makes zero sense. It makes zero sense because you are basically saying that the church should be able to dictate what the government does. By that very thing, you are saying that the church is the government. So how the hell can the government not dictate what the church does when the church is its own government? That literally makes zero sense. So obviously it has to go both ways. It is just mind-boggling how much people pretzel their brains to make themselves seem special. And thinking that their bigotry and their hatred that they quote in religion somehow makes them beyond reproach, and they can do whatever they want because they're a special little snowflake who can discriminate to their heart's content, hate whomever they want, and nobody can actually lift a finger to defend themselves. It's just really, really something. Okay, as I choke. Previously, churches risked losing their tax-exempt status by discussing or engaging in politics. Yeah, that's so quaint. When did we stop doing that? Then this summer, the Internal Revenue Service decided to allow religious leaders to endorse political candidates. Well, let's see. That's probably going to work out about as well as Citizens United did. A decision Schatzline took as a green light for him and other pastors to ramp up political activity. Because what could possibly go wrong? But, this isn't anything new. Like this article just said, it used to be that tax-exempt status was revoked if you did that. I remember when I was working at the library, a woman called. There was a election for judges, and she wanted to know which judges were anti-choice. Now, once upon a time, it was that judges weren't political. They followed the law. They followed the Constitution. So just asking for a guide that tells a person which judge to vote for because you find abortion icky, which who the hell thinks that abortion is awesome? Nobody does. It's just that those who are pro-choice actually acknowledge that shit happens and sometimes an abortion is necessary. That doesn't mean that those people are jumping for joy at the prospect of having an abortion. So, and judges, like I said, aren't supposed to weigh in either way. I mean, they might have personal opinions, but they're supposed to follow the law, not, this person is anti-choice, so they're, of course, going to just mindlessly rule against it. No, that's not how this is supposed to work. Anyway. Programs such as Campaign University serve as the next stage of this religious-driven political movement, said Eric McDaniel, a government professor who researches the intersection of race, religion, and politics at the University of Texas at Austin. Past movements encouraged churchgoers to become activists, he said, but Campaign University stands out for training Christian conservatives to seek public office. One of the things about this movement that's really important is that they started winning local elections, then started winning state, and then now they're winning at the national level, McDaniel said. And that's how you're able to build a movement and maintain a movement. You start locally. Which is why so many activists, political activists, stress that it's great that you pay attention to what's happening nationally, but you should really be paying attention to what's happening locally and vote in your local elections because that's going to have so much more impact on your life than national. In an attempt to better understand Mercy Culture's approach to recruiting candidates, 2 journalists from the Fort Worth Report purchased and completed the more than 5-hour Campaign University course and listened to hours of the For Liberty and Justice podcast. What became clear in the course is For Liberty and Justice's mission to push Christian conservative values beyond church doors and into the public sphere. Again, Personally, if you want to believe certain issues that your church pushes, fine. Like I said, it gets sticky that not all churches think alike. If they did, we wouldn't need a million denominations. The nonprofit states on its website that it vets and supports candidates who are willing to do whatever it takes to protect our God-given liberties and take a stand for biblical justice. And I have to ask, which biblical justice? Which are we talking about? Because there's a lot of biblical justice that these people do not actually follow, so yeah. Its leaders have said they stand against LGBTQ rights, well, there's a shock, and abortion access, another shock, and they have pushed for the ban of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in government and public education, which again, not a shock. These people probably, during the times of slavery, probably were on the side of the slave owners. So, like I said, not a shock on any of this. For $100, Campaign University provides its students the knowledge, practical skills, and spiritual guidance to make an impact for the kingdom in government, not just in a way that's passionate, but in a way that's calculated, Schatzline says within the first 5 minutes of the course. The Fort Worth report identified at least 10 people through social media posts, press releases, and podcasts who completed Campaign University. They included Texas GOP Chairman Abraham George, an unsuccessful candidate who ran for a Dallas City Council seat this year, Tarrant County Republican precinct chairs, campaign managers, and a number of people who work for or previously worked for Mercy Culture or for Liberty and Justice. None returned the Fort Worth report's request for comment. Because nothing sus with that. Schatzline twice agreed to an interview but never responded to efforts to set a date and did not return phone calls, emails seeking comment. He and other Mercy Culture pastors created Campaign University after working on Texas political campaigns, including the legislators for Liberty and Justice. Schatzline's previously told the Fort Worth Report that he's working to take the nonprofit to a national level. It's not unusual for churches or spiritual leaders to encourage political activity from congregants, said Amanda Tyler, Executive Director of the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty and lead organizer of the national nonprofit's Christians Against Christian Nationalism campaign. Because, again, and I will keep repeating it, not all Christians are Christian nationalists. Not all Christians are hateful. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with political activity. There are a lot of political movement in the South around Election Day where right after church, they would, put the church congregants on a bus and take them all to the polls to vote. And that's fine. They're not telling them who to vote for. Well, maybe they are nowadays, but they shouldn't. But, that's perfectly fine if that's what you want to do. But these are people who already, in theory, believe like you. So that's fine if you want to. But you should not be teaching people that it's okay to shove their religion down other people's throat. I really am not interested. It's that old saying, religion is like a dick. It's fine to have one. It's fine to be talk about and be proud of it, but it's not fine to whip it out and shove it down another person's throat. Just, All right. What does seem unusual and perhaps unique is an actual candidate training academy that's run out of the church, Tyler said. Often, particularly we're talking about partisan campaigns for public office, that's a place that churches and other houses of worship have largely steered clear of partisan politics. Schatzline has said he won't seek re-election to his seat representing North Fort Worth and its surrounding suburbs, but plans to continue as a pastor with Mercy Culture and to lead for liberty and justice. The National Faith Board that Schatzline has been tapped to join declares its mission is to be a strong, unified, uncompromising voice on issues such as religious freedom, marriage, reproductive and parental rights, and gender-affirming care. Okay. It's hilarious that a bunch of Christian nationalists are whining about religious freedom because in their eyes, religious freedom only concerns Christianity and their particular brand of Christianity. Nobody else deserves religious freedom otherwise. So, yeah. And marriage. Okay. You have a particular view of marriage. Great. You don't think same-sex marriage should be a thing? Don't marry someone of the same sex. It's really that easy to mind your own fucking business. Reproductive and parental rights. Okay. Only the people involved have a say of when they become parents and how many kids they have. None of your fucking business. And gender-affirming care, which, again, none of your fucking business because that's between the patient and the doctor. Because, again, as been said many times, gender-affirming care isn't just for trans people. Gender-affirming care also is something cis people enjoy. Whether it be after you're a certain age and you need hormone replacement therapy, or you had breast cancer and now you had a double mastectomy and so you want your breasts back. Whatever it is, it's gender affirming care. Or a woman, I had to have a hysterectomy because I had cramps from hell. And that turned out it was due to uterine fibroids and ovarian cysts. So that shit had to go. Which was fine because I wasn't planning on using any of that anyway. So it was fine. But that's gender affirming care. And if the Christian Nationalists had their way, which I've heard horror stories about this, is that I would be quizzed on what if I want to have children? What if my husband wants to have children? I'm not married, but that's never stopped anyone from harassing women about the fact that they will eventually get married, as if it's a foregone conclusion because somehow women have this biological need to get married and make babies or something, which is not true. But still, Gender-affirming care should not be something that's political. That is a medical issue. None of anybody else's damn business. It's never been more apparent that the church has to rise up and be a bold voice in American government today. Schatzline said in an October 27th video he uploaded to social media announcing his new position. Now, again, to have the church be a part of government, if you look back at the history of Europe, the problem was not that the government was telling the church what to do. The problem was that the church was telling the government what to do. So the interpretation that they're going with is so faulty. It's like, do you even know history? And I'm going to say no, because probably the only history book these people have ever read is the Bible. Probably never read another book in their entire freaking lives. That sentiment is recognized in Campaign University. At the start of the course, Schatzline tells Christians to ask themselves 3 questions the typical candidate might not consider, but that he stresses are the key to success if one is called to serve. Did the call to government come from the Holy Spirit? Okay. Will your loved ones pray with you about it? Even if you don't win, are you still giving God glory? God, this makes me want to puke. Don't run if you can't hear the Holy Spirit, because other voices on the campaign trail may shift your perspective, Schatzline said. Okay, again, that's assuming that everyone is a Christian, and since this is a Christian church, okay, fine. But that also seems to imply that they don't want non-Christians, because you have, in their mind, you have to hear the Holy Spirit. So, yeah. You have to be schizophrenic in order to run for office. Campaign University and other mercy culture political activities deliver on a commitment that Steve Pennate told the report he and fellow church pastors Landon Schott made to each other years ago. Build a church that would turn the city upside down and be a leader in local politics. Again, European history is littered with what could go wrong with that view. Schott and his wife, Heather Schott, senior pastor of Mercy Culture, did not return emails seeking comment for this story. You know, if you think so highly of your mission, what are you freaking afraid of to talk to the media? Over its 6 years, the church has become a center of conservative religious politics in the region and increasingly across the state. This year, members gathered for prayer at the Texas Capitol, blessing its walls on the first day of the 2025 legislative session. Last year, pastors urged Fort Worth Civil Council members, City Council members, using threats of litigation to approve the church's new shelter for victims of human trafficking, despite opposition from residents of the adjacent neighborhood. Council members in favor of the move said at the time that politics did not affect their decision. Fort Worth Mayor Maddie Parker, a Republican, did not return a request for comment on Mercy Culture's impact on the city through political efforts such as Campaign University. The skills taught in Campaign University build off lessons learned from Pennate's failed campaign for Fort Worth mayor in 2021. When he lost to Parker, the pastor told the Fort Worth Report. All right. Panate said tons of people have completed Campaign University since its creation. Neither he, Schatzline, nor Campaign University's other instructors provided lists of graduates. Yeah, that's not suspect at all. About 50 people were pictured in the Campaign University's first graduating class, according to a 2022 Instagram post for Liberty and Justice. Mercy Culture's expansion has included additional church campuses in Fort Worth, Dallas, Waco, and Austin, and it plans to open a San Antonio campus next year. Panate said for Liberty and Justice aims to partner with churches across the country as it seeks to elevate Campaign University to a national level. Although he didn't provide specifics, Panate said the goal is to create lessons for local churches to politically mobilize congregants, similar to how Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA mobilizes students on college campuses. Now, if that's all Charlie Kirk had done, that would be fine. However, it is well documented that he had a hit list against educators. So he might have been a free speech warrior. However, that is dulled by the fact that he actually had his followers threaten teachers simply for not agreeing with them. He said the church is already spreading awareness about Campaign University by opening for Liberty and Justice chapters in other states. As of late October, 2 for Liberty and Justice chapters outside of Texas offer Campaign University, Panate said. They are Florida's non-denominational Revived Church and Hawaii's Pentecostal megachurch, Kings Maui, according to Schatzline's social media posts. Representatives from the churches did not return requests for comment. The nonprofit plans to open its next chapter in Arizona at the start of 2026, Panate said. After that, he expects for Liberty and Justice to grow exponentially thanks to Schatzline's visibility on Trump's Faith Advisory Board. Next year is going to be explosive, Panate said. Religion has long had a historic role in major American political movements, McDaniel, the government professor, said. Leaders such as Baptist minister Martin Luther King Jr. were involved in the civil rights movement. Televangelist Jerry Falwell founded the political organization called the Moral Majority in 1979 and mobilized a generation of Christian conservative voters. Because Jerry Falwell was just beyond reproach. Ugh. This idea that God has called you to do this is a very empowering message. It gives you a clear source of identity and direction, McDaniel said. Many of Campaign University's teachings address basic civics that might be useful to anyone running for office. Its lessons and 92-page course materials offer hands-on assignments for participants to start engaging with local government, such as reading the U.S. Constitution, identifying the elected officials who represent them at different levels of government, and creating lists of potential campaign donors. Hold it. So, when you said experts, you meant constitutional scholars, not that they shouldn't have any civics education. That's good to hear. I was worried that, like the current administration, that civics it would be considered optional. So that's good to hear that they should have some very basic civics. Campaign University's goal is to bring Jesus into every sphere of influence and every mountain. Joshua Moore, another course instructor, says in the course's second lesson. That's what we're called to do as political activists. Moore, who served as Schatzline district director in the Texas House, is a former Republican New Hampshire state lawmaker. He did not return phone calls and emails seeking comment for the story. That seems to be a running theme here. Now, bringing Jesus into every sphere of influence at every mountain. Problem. Jesus never said anything about gender affirming care or the LGBT plus community, and yet you're taking a stand. So, are we sure about that? In Campaign University, instructors often emphasize what they describe as a divine calling for Christians to serve in local government. A grandma can pray at home on her knees, but who's in Austin on the inside that has a voice, that has a vote? Penny told the report. It starts in prayer, but you gotta get on the inside. Schatzline embodies this ethos in many ways, and he's become a well-known face in far-right Christian conservative politics in Texas. During this year's legislative session, he authored 75 state bills on a range of issues such as limiting DEI initiatives in local government, banning drag show performances in front of children, and further penalizing the possession or promoting of child pornography. He failed to get many of his bills passed this year, except for one aimed at criminalizing the promotion or possession of childlike sex dolls. Probably because, that's reasonable to ban, to criminalize, because what the hell, dudes? So, yeah, that makes sense. But since we're talking biblical justice, outside of child pornography, because, that's limiting DEI initiatives. Okay, so you're basically saying the only true Christians are white. Alrighty then. And banning drag show performances in front of children. What's wrong with drag shows? I mean, the ones that are X-rated basically are promoted as X-rated or adults only. Kid-friendly drag shows are not the same as X-rated drag shows. So, yeah. We're going to give this space back to the Holy Spirit, Schatzline said at the Capitol during the Mercy Culture-led worship session earlier this year. We give you this room. The 89th legislative session is yours, Lord. The members of this body are yours, Lord. This building belongs to you, Jesus. Again, let's just ignore the fact that not everybody's religious and not everyone's Christian. I mean, can you scream any louder that you want Christianity to be the only religion in this nation? And I would hate to see what you would do to non-Christians and atheists. So, yeah. I'm just full of the warm fuzzies. Landon Schott, the Mercy Culture co-founder, also participated in the January event at the Capitol, as did George, the state Republican Party chair, who has taken the Campaign University course. There is no separation between church and state, George said at the event, according to published reports. Yes, there is. I know that the First Amendment is inconvenient for you, but we have the First Amendment. We have the people who wrote the First Amendment mentioning that the First Amendment establishes a separation of church and state. So, yeah. Campaign University lessons highlight what its instructors argue were the Founding Fathers' deep religious beliefs as evidence that God was not separate from the public square, nor was that the intent of the founders. The founders were deists. They were not your Christians. They were not your brand of Christians. They were deists. For those who don't know what a deist is, they basically said God created the universe and then retired. It's like, okay, it's all up to you now. I'm just going to sit back and grab some popcorn and watch. He or she has absolutely nothing to do with what's going on. He's just sitting, kicking back and watching. Or maybe he went to a different universe and started the same process. We don't know. But deists do not think that God has a personal relationship with you. That's not what deists do. So where the hell are we getting the idea that these people were wanting religion? Now, to say that God was not separate from the public square, again, nobody says that you cannot discuss religion. You can discuss it in public even, as long as the person you're discussing it with either can say yay or nay, or just can walk away. You cannot force people to listen to you. It's really that simple. So, to claim the public square and government are somehow the same, no. The Founding Fathers insisted upon a country that welcomed the role of religion into society, viewing it as a public good. Again, no. I mean, they accepted the fact that religion exists. And yes, most people then were religious, so there was a role for religion in society. But I don't know if they viewed it as a public good. I think it was there. I don't think they actually said anything either way about it. And again, that's not the same as forcing religion down people's throats. Not the same thing. All right, said Jeremy Dice, senior counsel for the First Liberty Institute, a Plano-based legal group known for representing clients in high-profile religious freedom cases, including a Plano student who was banned from distributing candy cane pens with a religious message on them at a school party, and an Oregon woman who refused to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex couple due to her religious beliefs. Well, the first one, definitely a public school is considered an extension of government. So no, you cannot do that. And the Oregon women who refused to bake a cake, well, either you work for the public or you don't. It's funny how these people are screaming that we should have public access to spout our religious beliefs, but yet those same public aren't allowed to impose their beliefs on you. Because asking someone who works for the public to bake a cake is somehow beyond the pale, but you forcing your religious beliefs on that same public is somehow fine. Yeah, we don't want to be consistent or anything. Abandoning our societal cynicism toward religion would strengthen our commitment to liberty. Really? You really think that that's the problem here? It would do much to strengthen our country to regain the vision of our founders that celebrated the role of religion in our lives, public and private, Dee said in an email to the report. Again, the founders were mostly deists. Were there some amongst them who were religious? Probably. I won't say that none of them were, but most of them were deists. And they obviously knew their history and understood how important religion was to people. Otherwise, they would not have created the First Amendment to begin with. So they understood that religion was important. They never claimed it wasn't. They just didn't want government interference or religion interfering with government because they saw what happened in Europe. They saw how badly that goes. But, you would have to actually learn history to understand that. And obviously, these people do not care to learn history because they might actually learn something. But under the Establishment Clause, government entities shouldn't impose religious laws or policies, said Tyler, the Christians Against Christian Nationalism organizer. Exactly. Laws should serve and support a pluralistic society, she said. Exactly. Even if everybody in this country were Christian, that still would not give them the right to impose their brand of Christianity because, again, not all Christians think like the Christian nationalists. Why? Because otherwise we wouldn't have all these denominations, some of which may seem very, very similar, and there might be like one or two issues that they differ on, but still, there are different denominations. That should tell you that not all Christians think like you. If our goal is to engage in partisan politics, is to impose our own interpretation of the Bible, our own religious views on other people, that will lead to harm for people in our communities that are not of the same religious views, Tyler said. Exactly. Exactly. And this is a Christian saying that. I mean, how hard is it to understand that not, and I get this so often with people in my comments and other comments acting like they will, throw out Bible verses or explain how their interpretation of the Bible as if that somehow proves a point. It just proves that you believe it. It does not speak to all Christians because Christians interpret the Bible differently. Then, as I pointed out before, that there have been mistranslations in the Bible that we're familiar with. And people are still just going with the traditional interpretation because it allows them to hate the people they want to hate. All right. And I'm almost an hour in. Nice. Hopefully there's not that much more. For Liberty and Justice's efforts to mobilize Christian conservatives through Campaign University come at a pivotal moment in Tarrant County, where Fort Worth is located, as Republicans seek to control of the nation's largest urban red county, which has shown occasional signs of turning purple. Tarrant voters supported Joe Biden's presidential bid in 2020 and twice voted in favor of Republican Senator Ted Cruz's Democratic opponents in 2018 and 2024. I wonder with the redistricting how that's going to go. Every single seat matters, and now is the time to rise up. Now is the time to run. Now is the time to get godly men and women in office, Schatzline told dozens of attendees at September 9th for Liberty and Justice event at Mercy Culture aimed at encouraging political action. The Republican majority Tarrant County Commissioners Court, the county's governing body, led by County Judge Dim O'Hare, steamrolled through a redistricting process this summer to gain a stronger majority, as detractors alleged racially motivated gerrymandering. In late October, a federal appeals court upheld a judge's decision not to block the new map. O'Hare did not respond to requests for comment. Like I said, it's going to happen throughout this article. After state lawmakers adopted a new congressional map to create additional GOP seats at Trump's request this summer, the political makeup of Tarrant County's congressional delegation is poised to shift from 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats to 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat. For Liberty and Justice continues to develop its pipeline of candidates for local and state offices. The group circulates a friends and family list of candidates that it says share the same values. One candidate who repeatedly made the list was conservative Fort Worth City Council member Alan Blaylock, who announced his bid for Schatzline's seat October 27 after the lawmaker said he wouldn't seek re-election. I think I've mentioned it before on this channel, but sometimes getting those lists actually is useful because, in the way that those who share these values can know who to vote for, it'll help those who do not know who not to vote for. Others named on the list include city council and school board candidates across the country. Several told the report they weren't required to complete Campaign University to be included on the list and that they hadn't taken the course. For Liberty and Justice is prepared to ensure strong Republican results as Tarrant voters gear up for next year's elections, plus a runoff election to fill a Texas Senate seat vacated by now acting Comptroller Kelly Hancock. It makes sense that Tarrant County, which political experts describe as a bellwether in national politics, may be a driver in national conversations around how religion and politics intersect, said McDaniel, the UT professor. His message echoed the sentiments expressed by 4 Liberty and Justice leaders and attendees during a recent night of action at Mercy Culture Church. Throughout the night, volunteers who completed Campaign University emphasized how the lessons can not only activate people to run for office, but also enable them to lead small groups of fellow Christian conservatives in political action, such as advocating for policy issues at city council or school board meetings. Event organizers encouraged attendees to get civically engaged that night by joining small political action groups in neighborhoods scattered across Tarrant County, with specific interests such as biblical citizenship or prayer and intercession. To end the night, one Campaign University graduate led the crowd in prayer. "We need you, Lord, desperately to be able to accomplish what you are calling us to do for this nation, for our city, for our country, for our state." Okay, that's an interesting, you would think it's for our city, for our state, for our country, but that was a very weird, progression. Anyway, that is the end of that article. So yeah, it's been a while that the Republican Party seems to be of the mindset that religious freedom is paramount, but only my religious freedom. Your religious freedom doesn't count. Now, I did think I saw an article Now, I don't know if this was concluded or it was just a suit brought. Someone who's a Zoroastrist, I guess. He was bringing a suit against the government for trampling on his religious beliefs. But I didn't read the article, so I don't know exactly what that's about. But yeah, you want religious freedom? Great. That should be for everybody. And that's what the First Amendment allows. Religious freedom for everybody. But that's not what Christian nationalists want. They want religious freedom for themselves, and they want to dictate to everybody else how they should believe, which is not religious freedom. Anyway, that is all I have for this article and this video. So with that, I will see you guys in the next one.